Every people has its gods, and every people has something worse, the thing they do not name after dark. Tonight we return to the islands of the Philippines, not for a god this time, for the creature grandmothers still lower their voices to talk about, the one that is not a stranger in the woods, the one that lives on your street and smiles at you in the morning. They call it the Aswang. Start with the sound, because in the islands, that is how you know. Late at night, when the village has gone quiet, you might hear a bird call from somewhere out in the dark. A soft, dry clicking. Tick, tick, tick. And the rule, every child in those provinces learns the rule, is that the sound lies. If the tick-tick is loud, ringing clear across the fields, you are safe. It means the creature is far away. But if the sound grows faint, soft and small and almost gone, then it is directly above your roof. Sit with that for a moment. It is not a monster that announces itself. It is a monster whose warning gets quieter the closer it comes to your children. And the last thing you hear before it arrives is nothing at all. Now, the first thing to understand is that the Aswang is not one creature. It is a category, an umbrella word covering a whole family of things that wear a human face by day. There is the tik-tik and the wak-wak, named for their calls. There is the tianak that cries like an abandoned baby at the side of a road until someone kind enough stops to pick it up. There is the shapeshifter that runs as a black dog or a great pig at the edge of the headlights. And there is the one the islands fear most, which we will come to, but all of them share the same terrible design. Not one of them is a beast in the wilderness. Every single one of them has a day job. By sunlight, the Aswang is a neighbor, quiet, polite, perhaps a little solitary. She sells vegetables. He mends nets. They come to the fiesta, and they bring food, and they hold your baby and tell you she has your mother's eyes. And the horror of the Aswang was never really the wings. It was that the village could not tell which of them it was. And now the one that has haunted the islands for 400 years. The manananggal. The name comes from a word that simply means to remove, to separate. Because at night, in some quiet place away from the house, a banana grove, an empty field, she takes off her humanity like a coat. The body splits at the waist. Great leathery wings unfold from her back, and the upper half of her rises into the night sky and flies. The lower half stays behind, standing there in the dark, rooted, waiting, utterly still, until dawn approaches and she comes back down to rejoin it. And that detail is not decoration. That detail is the whole reason the islands believed they could win. What does she hunt? The stories are consistent, and they are cruel about it. She looks for the houses where someone is pregnant. She lands on the roof, silent now, and unrolls a tongue like a thread, thin enough to slip between the slats of a bamboo floor, or the gap in a thatched roof, or a crack around a window. And she feeds on the child before it is born, which tells you exactly what this monster is made of. Go back 300 years to a village with no doctor and no hospital and no explanation. A woman loses a baby in the night. Nobody can say why. And in the silence where an answer should be, a shape forms. Something came. Something took her. Grief needs a story, or it has nowhere to go. So how do you fight a neighbor with wings. The islands built an entire practical arsenal, and it is wonderfully specific. Salt, garlic, ash from the hearth, a dried stingray tail hung by the door or used as a whip, ginger, the rosary after the Spanish came, wood from a particular tree, but the master stroke was the salt on the lower half. Remember, she left half of herself standing in a field, and she must return to it before the sun comes up. So the hunters did not go looking for the flying thing in the sky. They went looking for what she left on the ground, and when they found it, they poured salt into it, or ash, or crushed garlic, and then the two halves would not join. Sunrise comes, and the village watches to see who does not come back whole. And there was one more test, quieter and stranger than all of them. Look into the person's eyes. Look at your own reflection there. If you are standing upright, they are human. But if your reflection is upside down, turn around, walk away, and do not let them know you saw it. Think about what that ritual really is. A whole village, looking very carefully into each other's faces, hunting for the moment something looks wrong. And there is a place. There is always a place. In the Philippines, that place is Capiz, a province on the island of Panay, on the sea, with old churches and rice fields and perfectly ordinary towns, and a nationwide reputation as the home of the Aswang. Ask anyone in Manila, and they will make a joke about it. Ask someone from Capiz, and the joke lands a little differently. They have spent generations being the punchline of the country's oldest fear. People from other provinces asking, only half kidding, whether their grandmother has wings. Which is the part of monster stories nobody puts in the movies. The monster is imaginary. The reputation is not. Somebody always has to live in the province where the stories say the monsters are. And now the part of this story that changed how I hear all of it. Look closely at who the Aswang usually is in the oldest accounts. She is a woman, often older, often unmarried or widowed, often living at the edge of the village, alone, often someone who knows about herbs and childbirth and medicine. Before the Spanish arrived, those women had a name and a place. The Babaylan, the healers and spiritual leaders of their communities, women who held real authority, who midwifed the babies and spoke to the spirits and were listened to. And when the colonizers came, with a new faith and a new hierarchy that had no room for them, those women were the competition. Scholars of Philippine folklore have traced how the monster stories sharpened in exactly that period, how the village healer at the edge of town became the thing on the roof. I am not telling you the Aswang was invented by anyone. The islands had their night terrors long before any ship arrived. But a monster is a useful thing, and a woman who lives alone and knows things and answers to no one has been a convenient shape for a monster in almost every country on Earth. And here is the proof of how powerful this belief still was, well inside living memory. In the early 1950s, during the Hook Rebellion, an American officer named Edward Lansdale was advising the Philippine Army against communist guerrillas in the countryside. The guerrillas held a hill the army could not take. So Lansdale's team did not attack it. They spread a rumor through the local villages that an Aswang had come to the hillside. Then, one night, they ambushed the last man in a rebel patrol and left his body on the trail, arranged deliberately to look exactly like what the villagers had been whispering about. His unit found him at dawn, and by the next evening, the guerrillas had abandoned the hill entirely. Lansdale wrote about it himself years later in his memoirs. It is one of the strangest documented moments in modern warfare. A superpower's intelligence officer, in the middle of the 20th century, loading a folk monster like a weapon and firing it at trained soldiers. And it worked. Because the Aswang was never a story those men had merely heard. It was one they had grown up inside.
So what is the Aswang, really?
Every country invents monsters out of what it is actually afraid of. The Norse feared the winter, so they made a wolf. Europe feared the forest, so they filled it with witches. But the islands did not fear the wilderness. Filipino life was built on the village, on the neighbor who feeds you when the harvest fails, on the family next door who will raise your children if something happens to you. Nothing there is more valuable than trust. So of course the great monster of the Philippines is not a thing in the dark woods. It is a neighbor. It is the person you already let inside. The Aswang is what it feels like to realize you cannot see inside anyone else. Not really. And that you have to trust them anyway. That is why the salt and the garlic never quite finish the story. You can find the lower half in a field. You can watch the sunrise and see who comes back whole. But you can never look at a face over a fence in the morning and be certain. That is the oldest fear the islands have, and it does not need wings.
That is the Aswang, the monster with a day job.
Next time, we leave the islands for the desert, to a hall where the dead are brought to a golden scale, and a heart is weighed against a single feather, and where something is waiting under the table if the heart is heavier. The Egyptian weighing of the heart. Follow the fire, and I will tell you that one too. Until then, sleep well, or don't.